Welcome guys, so this is going to be a video talking about the theories, the sociological theories and their application to health. So this is going to be a series of videos. This first video is going to introduce sociological theory, give an overview of what we're talking about and discuss functionalism and its application to health. Now before we get into this, there's a few things I want to flag up. So if you've not done sociology, don't panic. This is hopefully going to give you a brief introduction so you're confident enough to write your coursework. If you've done sociology, you'll probably know some of the theory, but we're applying it to health and social care. In sociology, you're applying it to family education. So some of the resources, some of the things will be different in its applications. It's worth looking at the video. Now, the first thing on the screen here is two images. Now I'm going to get these sent out to everyone. These are just visual summaries of some of the key themes in sociology. So on the left image here, we have the key themes about what is sociology and how socialization works. So these were a lot of concepts you talked about in P1. So the idea of, we have society and what makes up society. We've got the norms, you've got values, you've got culture, key concepts you all defined. These are all taught and transmitted via socialization, which is done by the family as primary SOC and the main institutions as secondary SOC, and obviously health and social care is one of these institutions of secondary socialization. All of this impacts on you as the individual, and it shapes who you are, your understanding of the world. On the other side, the other image here is about social differentiation. So we talked again about the differences, the class, age, gender, ethnicity, and again the idea that you have social differentiation, you've got hierarchy, stratification, it's all based on power relationships. And ultimately, those with the most power have a better status and they're going to have what we call better life chances, better health in this case, longer term. So they were some concepts from P1, and I just want to remind you that they will carry over into P2 because they form the basis and the core of sociological thinking. Now, what is a sociological theory? So the first thing here is a theory is an idea about how something works or how something exists or what something does. So when we're trying to explain health and social care from a sociological point of view, we're going to look at the roles, the function, who benefits from the healthcare system. Is it individual? Is it society? Is it the healthcare system itself? So what is the benefit? And every single theory we're going to look at 5 key theories in our coursework, have a different view of this stuff and how society works and how healthcare works. Now, just as an example, you've got these 2 images on the screen, and what you might be seeing is going to be different to other people. So these are these optical illusion images that cause a lot of discussion. So on the left, you've got the trainer. Now, you may see the same as me. I, for example, see grey and blue. So, for example, this part of the shoe, the fabric here is all a light grey. The rest of the material, so the trim, this stuff around the side, the laces are kind of a baby blue, not too dissimilar actually from this PowerPoint shade here. On the right, again, the dress on the side, I see blue and black. So we've got lots of blue going across, and then there's obviously these top bits up here. In my interpretation of it, are black, and that's what I see. Some of you will share that view. Some of you will see different colours. I know my other half, for example, sees pink and white on the trainer. So these different views, obviously this kind of reflects a good interpretation of what sociology is. We will be looking at the same thing, but we see it in a different way. And sociological theory is all looking at the same society, but they see it and interpret it differently. So as it says here on this slide, all the theories are looking at the same thing, but they see it differently. So just like this image of the elephant, all these different people are seeing and interpreting it differently because they're not looking at the whole picture as a group. So the 6 theories, now there are 6 theories in sociology, but as I said before, we're going to focus on 5. So the main theories would be functionalism, Marxism, feminism, social action, and postmodernism. Now, New Right is a sociological theory, but it doesn't fit in here. It does fit in with healthcare, but we're not going to focus on it too much because it's a slightly different, it's a political theory. As an extension, and if you do sociology, one of the things you could do is you could always bring in the New Right and some of the sort of current policies on healthcare. But for the roles and purposes of the coursework, we're going to focus on the main 5 as it stands. Now, the theories, as I said before, functionalism, Marxism, feminism, social action, postmodernism, they're all looking at the same issue. They're all trying to explain society, but from a different perspective. And when they try to do this, we try and break these theories down. So when we try and organize the theories, we look at them in terms of their approach, their relationship. Is it a macro or micro? And I'm going to explain these terms in a second, but they are all defined in your pack. Is it a structure or an action approach? Is it conflict or consensus? These are the three categorizations of theory. Every time we start discussing a theory, we can say it is a macro theory, it is structural, it is consensus, it is similar to this theory, which is also macro or also so it's a way of easily drawing parallels and comparisons and trying to organize the theories in relation to one another. Now this is again another image that will be sent around to you all, but again I like this as a visual overview of all those key concepts. It kind of puts them in the construct of where they fit in. So we'll start off by looking at different things like macro and micro. So macro theories, as we see here on the left, they look at the big picture. So as a researcher, as you can see here, the sociologist, they are looking at the whole of society, every bit, and it's from a big perspective. Whereas on the micro level, on this side here, you've got the researcher, but he or they are looking at an individual, so very small scale. So macro being big, micro being small. And again, the macro approach over here is all about the big workings, how things fit together, how things are organized, how they're structured. The micro is all about this one individual, how they think, how they work, how they act. We talk about social action theory as a definition, and I always like to throw in the word interaction, so social interaction almost, because that's what we're really looking at. It's looking at interaction with other people. Now, both of these theories try to explain the working of society. So you can see society is at the top in both diagrams, but it's the direction of of information and processes. So in macro theory, structural theories, it's a top-down approach. Society determines the institutions, family, education, healthcare. That determines norms and values, and they influence us, just like socialization processes. In a micro theory, which is bottom up, so it starts at the bottom and works its way up, we shape society. It's the same process, just reverse. So we shape the norms, the values, the culture, the sanctions, the right, the wrong. That shapes the institutions of society. That, in a whole, creates society. So these are the two different approaches. So every time we look at theory, we're going to think about, is it macro? Is it micro? Is it structured? So is it a top down? Is it a social action, which is bottom up? Is it a conflict theory or a consensus, which you're going to come to later? And one of the other things we don't really talk about is whether it's a modern or postmodern. So we'll come to that in a second. So each theory tries to explain the world in their own way. Now, as I said before, there's some differences here. Most theories are what we call modern. They exist in the modern era. The modern era was sort of the 1750s or post-industrialization, let's say 1900s to the 1980s. This is the modern era, and this is obviously when most of the theories existed. Functionalism, Marxism, feminism, new right, social action, all existed in this time zone. So all these theories look at the same modern version of society. Postmodern theory, however, takes place in the postmodern era, which is from the 1980s to now. So they are looking at a slightly different version of society. So they are slightly more contemporary, and that's one big difference between modern and postmodern theories, is that the modern theories look at the same version of society, postmodern look at a slightly different. So that could be one big similarity and difference you can draw when you're looking at and discussing these theories. Now, sociological theories, as I said, they can be broken into different structures or different categories. Structure versus action, consensus versus conflict, macro versus micro, modern versus postmodern. So that's one of the big differences that we can broadly use to divide the theory. Now, structural theories, that would include Marxism, functionalism, feminism. They say that we are shaped by the society around us. So our behaviour is affected by the society we live in. So the media, education, family, healthcare, employment all shape our behaviour and control us. So very much a structured view. We are puppets on a string controlled by society. And ultimately, sociology to try and establish cause and effect. So try and explain how society shapes us. Action approaches, they, as we said, they look on the individual. They're small scale, they're micro. So how does the individual understand the world around them? So it's all about challenging the way society works. It's all about challenging and explaining individual behaviours, their rights to decisions. In the research, interactionists use this concept of Verstehen in the research, trying to get meaning and understanding. So it's all about studying small groups, how they interact and how they understand the world and how these individuals shape the world around them. Another key difference is whether they're conflict or consensus. Now, a conflict theory is based on the idea that as a society we generally agree, we all share ideas and values and beliefs, and it's quite optimistic. Functionalism is a key consensus theory where we are all socialised into the same ideals, we all share them, and we all, on the most part, work together. Conflict theories like Marxism, feminism reject this idea of shared agreement. They say there's a disagreement, there's a conflict between two groups. So for Marxism, it's working class and the sort of upper classes. For feminism, it's men and women. So there's a difference between two groups, and it's a form of conflict. Now, all these theories, whether they're conflict or consensus, these theories, particularly functionalism, Marxism, feminism, all structural, all macro theories, and they're all modern theories. So let's go into functionalism in a bit more detail and look at what they say about healthcare. So functionalism as a theory, to sum up really, macro, it looks at the whole of society. It's a consensus approach, so we all agree, we all share norms and values, we all get along. It's a structural theory, so again, society is structured, it's designed, and we are influenced and controlled by that structure. And one of the big things is this organic analogy, and just like the little diagram you've got here on the screen, functionalism, and particularly some functions like Durkheim, which is a key thinker we'll talk about at some point, he compares society to the living body. So if you imagine like this diagram, the body is made up of lots of bits: brain, ears, eyes, lungs, liver, stomach. All of these individual parts of the body have a separate job. They have their own role, they have their own purpose, they have their own function, and they work independently. But they are what we call interrelated. They are connected together. So the lungs take in oxygen, which is then put into the blood system. The heart pumps the blood around to the organs. The organs use the blood to continue working. The stomach digests food to pass it on to the intestines. The liver removes certain harmful chemicals and pollutants and toxins. The kidneys remove that waste product. The bowels continue with digestion, extract more nutrients, and then get rid of more waste. The brain controls all the processes, and the eyes, the ears, also allow the brain to interpret what's going on. So all these jobs, all these bits of the body do a different role, but they are all working together. And when it comes to the view of healthcare, functionalism shares this view. It's a positive institution. It has a positive function for society, and it helps society function. It prepares people for the world, helps keep society going, has a role in supporting the economy, the family, the workplace, education. Healthcare is essential. And if you think how recently the current climate and issues with corona have highlighted how essential the healthcare system is for the whole society to maintain and keep working. So when it comes to functionalism, two key thinkers, we're going to talk about Parsons, which is this lovely chap here. This is Parsons. He was kind of key in the 50s, and then we've got Murdoch, who's kind of key thinker in the 40s and 50s. So you can see these thinkers are in the middle of that modern era. They're quite outdated, they're older thinkers. So that's one of the big criticisms we're going to see of functionalism as we progress. So this is the gap fill in your pack, and it just explains the functionalism perspective on society. So as you said, functionalism draws an analogy between society and the living organism, and compares society to the human body, which is made up of parts. They work together, and this is obviously mirrors the idea of institutions like family, education, healthcare, religion, all performing a separate job but working together for the greater good of society. Just like the organs perform a separate job, but work for the greater good of keeping the body alive. So each institution has a function, and that maintains the whole. So crime and punishment, for example, sets the boundaries for acceptable behaviour. One of the big parts of the analogy that functionalism highlights was the idea that shared norms, shared values, a shared culture is like the skin in this body analogy. So it holds all the organs in place, keeps everything together, and has its own purpose and function. So that's why it's important we have those shared norms and values. Now, when it came to Parsons, his theory in terms of maintaining order was that we need to create value consensus. We need a system or an institution that helps keep society running. And he highlighted that the family was a good example of this institution, that it provided what he called two basic and irreducible functions. They can't be broken down anymore, and they can't be done by anything else. So he said the family was really responsible for primary socialization, teaching us the basic norms, values, and culture, and it helped maintain adult personalities, stabilize adult personalities. And again, if you've done sociology of the family, you're probably fairly familiar with these concepts. If you haven't done it before, don't panic. All you really need to know is for Parsons, the family was a key institution. It helped us fit into society through socialization, and it helped maintain adults and keep them happy and balanced, and help them perform their job in economic functions and maintaining and raising children. Murdoch, he also talks about how the family is really important. Now, again, I know these are talking about family and not healthcare, but we'll look at the healthcare application in a second. This is just a general overview of what they think. So Murdoch stressed that he studied 250 societies and claimed that there was a family in every single one, and the family had essential jobs. It was reproduction, socialization, sexual regulation, so allowing adults to engage in regular and regulated sexual activity, and it had an economic function. Again, ultimately, you have sex, you reproduce, you've got to socialize the kids, teach them all the values, and you get a job to pay for them. Now, the general weaknesses of functionalism as a theory are that it overemphasizes the level of consent. It assumes that everyone gets along, everyone is happy, everything is working. And there isn't much research in the way that sort of disagrees with this, in the sense that they haven't looked into whether this is not the case. It generally assumes that this exists, but there's no research to reveal the common values. Society is given too much power, so again it suggests the system has a life of its own, that we are socialized to work in the system. Social action theory, which is, as we know, we see is micro and action, the very opposite of functionalism, would say that we shape society, society doesn't shape us. It doesn't consider the importance of conflict. It paints this rosy, happy picture of society. Marxist feminists say that our society is full of conflict. And lastly, socialization seems to create harmony, and without it, society wouldn't exist. But it doesn't highlight that crime, deviance, abuse, these are not harmonious things. These are not beneficial for society. So why do these problems, these bad things, still happen? Now, when it comes to healthcare, functionalism has two key contributions, and actually the healthcare contributions come from Parsons. So he says that in terms of the view of the medical profession, Parsons says we trust doctors. Doctors are professionals. They go through lots of training. They act in the interest of patients rather than personal gain, so they're altruistic. They value equality, so all patients should be treated the same. The oath and the declaration about treating people if they need it, not doing any harm. These values, all patients are treated equally, and they're struck off. If doctors break the code, they can be struck off by the General Medical Council or GMC. So therefore, doctors contribute to the well-being and are given a high status. They are helping society, and they are skilled professionals. We value them. When it comes to the sick role, Parsons talked about how sickness was a form of deviance. It threatens stability. So if you're sick and unwell, you can't perform your function. You can't go to work and do your job. You can't run your family. So in order to prevent people abusing this system, ill health should be treated as a social order. element. And so the idea that medical professionals play a role in defining and assessing who is sick and allocating the sick role. So just like how a doctor will give you a sick note if you are unable to work, the idea being you go to the doctor, they will confirm that you are unwell, they will give you recognition of this, they will give you a treatment, and your responsibility is to make yourself better to keep working. The doctor has performed his role in allocating whether you are sick. He gives you a treatment, your responsibility is to make yourself better, and all of this benefits society. Now, when it comes to application of healthcare, and particularly thinking about our setting or your settings, some of the ways I've thought about this was that, your doctor will be trained, and probably very highly trained. They would have gone through lots of medical education and training. They probably would have worked in different fields and different areas. So we see the doctor as highly trained. And I found this quite evident if you go and see your nurse practitioner. So does the same job as a GP, can make the same diagnosis as a GP, but they will need to go and get the GP to sign off and check what they have diagnosed you. So if you have an assessment, they write a prescription, they will need to go get the GP to sign off on it. Doctors can allocate the sick note, as we said before. All patients are expected to follow the recommendation treatments, and there are codes of practice that ensure doctors are regulated. So these would be the ways we can link functionalism to what we see in our setting. Now, the key strengths of functionalism is that we put a high lot of trust in doctors. They naturally go through lots of training. It encourages this interrelation of different sections. So every bit of society is working together. So family, education, healthcare. It provides medical care and treatment, which is good for society. It recognises the connections between healthcare and social institutions. So it isn't just about physical health treatment, it's also about social support, mental support. So it kind of does recognise that there are these wider needs of individuals. It isn't just making them healthy, it's also supporting them in other ways. It does reflect quite Western approaches to healthcare, which I put as a strength, but it could also equally be considered a weakness. It only reflects the Western approach to medicine, and employers trust the validity of the sick note. So again, if you get let off work because you are sick, employers will trust that because obviously they see that as the doctor has confirmed you are unwell. The main criticisms, the flaws in this research would be that it's about maintaining high levels of rewards for doctors. So controlling, restricting who enters the profession maintains a high demand for high salaries. And this could be seen as almost going against that altruistic approach. So alternatives like complementary medicine, which don't need as much training or expertise, are seen as inferior, but going to your doctor is seen as the best form of medicine. That keeps the demand for the profession high. Doctors may not also always work altruistically. So, doctors who go into private medicine make a profit. So again, is that the doctor working for the good of the patient or for the good of their pocket? Doctors do not always treat everyone with the same equality. So what has been found is that middle-class patients get longer consultations. They will get better recommendations than patients who maybe are working class or seen less favourably. So people who are obese are seen less favourably by doctors. It's almost like they've self-inflicted their illness on themselves. Medical professionals may not provide the best care. So the British Journal of General Practice found that 41% of people visited a GP 3 or more times before they were diagnosed with symptoms of cancer. So again, the idea that doctors don't always pick up on healthcare. Again, they are people, but again, it does go against this image that they are perfect. And we do see medical incompetence. It's quite difficult to uncover. Doctors don't tend to criticise fellow medics, but there have been some high-profile cases of medical negligence and doctors not doing their job properly, and that has fouled individuals or led to deaths. So just some examples of the media, just to kind of wrap this up, and just so these are contemporary examples you can pop into your work. So I've put the link in, the link will be sent out to you. I've put the headline here, but again, this nurse, this is dysfunctional. She was not doing her job, and we could use this in the sense that because the nurse did not perform her role properly, she was struck off. I put the GMC, it probably would have been the NMC, Nurses and Midwife Council, not. So let's maybe put a quick change there on here. So that would be NMC, Nurses and Midwives Council. So not performing a role. So again, she's not doing a job, she gets sacked, and that's beneficial for society. And the healthcare reassures us that the healthcare does its job. This other example, 2 examples here. So sugar tax producing results. Britain goes on the diet with calorie capping. Again, it's preventative healthcare measure. It's trying to reduce illness and disease, and has been introduced for the good of society as a whole. So coming back to that organic analogy argument we put forward. So this is for the good of society. Okay, there we have it. So that's functionalism and the media. Sorry, functionalism and healthcare wrapped up in sort of, again, about 25 minutes or so. Go through your packs, go through materials, chat with your teacher, and again, any questions, get in touch with who's helping you with your coursework. And there we have it.